I held the envelope against the kitchen window, watching dust motes dance in afternoon light. 23 years of marriage, and Graham had never given me anything without explanation. The paper felt expensive between my fingers, cream colored with my name written in his careful script. Day when anything is allowed. I read aloud to the empty room. No signature, no context. Just an address on the city's outskirts and a time, 8 p.m. I set the envelope on the counter next to my coffee cup. The invitation inside bore an elegant border, theater masks embossed in gold. The address meant nothing to me, somewhere past the industrial district, where old warehouses crumbled into weeds. Graham emerged from his study, tie loosened, reading glasses perched on his nose. He moved with the deliberate calm that had attracted me in law school, when other men my age still fumbled with confidence. You found it, he said, not quite a question. What is this? I turned the invitation over, searching for clues. Exactly what it says. He poured himself coffee, steam rising between us. A gift. Graham. You'll understand when you get there. He kissed my forehead, his lips warm against my skin. Trust me. I studied his face for hints of the game we were playing. His gray eyes held something I couldn't name, anticipation mixed with something deeper. After 2 decades together, I knew his expressions like sheet music. This was new. The clock above the stove ticked toward 5, 3 hours to decide. I thought of our dinner parties, where I played the perfect attorney's wife, our scheduled intimacies, predictable as quarterly reports, the careful way we'd learned to want only what was safe. Will you be there? I asked. His smile held secrets. In a way. The theater sat like a forgotten dream at the end of a gravel road. Art Deco facade, windows dark except for a single light above the entrance. I parked beside a black sedan, my heels clicking against broken asphalt. The lobby smelled of old velvet and forgotten performances. A man in a dark suit waited by the inner doors. Tall, maybe 30, with the kind of composed stillness that spoke of careful instruction. Mrs. Chen, he said, though I hadn't given my name. Please, follow me. We walked through silence thick as curtains. The theater was smaller than I'd imagined, maybe 50 seats arranged in intimate rows, empty except for shadows and the weight of expectation. On stage, 11 men stood in a loose semicircle, different heights, different builds, but all sharing the same quality of patient readiness. They wore simple clothes, dark jeans, white shirts, like a uniform of possibility. The lights dimmed everything except the stage, where warm illumination created a golden circle. I felt exposed standing in the aisle, still wearing my navy dress from the office, still carrying my purse like armor. One of the men stepped forward, Hispanic, maybe 25, with kind eyes that held no judgment. He extended his hand. The choice is yours, he said quietly. I looked up at the empty seats, scanning for Graham's familiar silhouette. Nothing but darkness beyond the third row. Yet I felt watched, studied, as if the theater itself had eyes. My wedding ring caught the stage lights as I reached out. The man's hand was warm, calloused from real work. He helped me up the steps, and I felt the floorboards beneath my feet like a threshold crossed. Behind us, I heard the soft whisper of the curtain rising. Time moved differently under the stage lights. Each touch became deliberate, choreographed by some unspoken understanding. Hands guided fabric away from skin. Breath warmed the space between intention and action. I closed my eyes and let myself fall into the rhythm of it, the careful dance of strangers who knew their roles perfectly. No words were needed. Each man approached with reverence, as if I were something precious being unwrapped slowly, carefully. The first kiss tasted like mint and possibility. The second carried the weight of transgression made beautiful. I felt myself dissolving into someone I didn't recognize. Someone who could want this, could take what was offered without apology. The warmth of skin, the whisper of movement, the soft sounds of breath catching in the golden circle of light. I was the center of something larger than myself, something orchestrated but real. The men moved around me like dancers, each taking their turn in the choreography of desire. I gave myself to it completely, feeling the last walls of my careful life crumble into something honest and raw. When the final touch faded and I stood alone in the circle of light, breathing hard and transformed, I understood what Graham had given me. Not just permission, but freedom from the woman I'd been pretending to be. The theater held its breath, waiting for what came next. The sound started slowly, a single pair of hands coming together in steady rhythm. Then I saw him, rising from the last row like a ghost materializing from shadow. Graham, still in his work shirt, still wearing the face I'd kissed goodbye this morning. He walked down the aisle as he applauded, his steps echoing in the quiet theater. The other men had faded back into the wings, leaving me alone on stage, still catching my breath, still feeling the heat of what had just happened. Magnificent, he said, his voice carrying easily across the space between us. Absolutely magnificent. I stood there, exposed in every way possible, watching my husband of 23 years approach the stage. His eyes held no anger, no betrayal, only a satisfaction so deep it made my knees weak. Graham. My voice sounded strange in the empty theater. You were perfect. He climbed the steps with the same deliberate calm he brought to everything. Every moment exactly as I imagined. He reached for my hands, still warm from other touches, and kissed my fingertips one by one. His lips were familiar, but the gesture felt like meeting a stranger. I don't understand, I whispered. You will. He gathered my scattered clothes, helping me dress with the same careful attention the others had shown in undressing me. This was just the beginning. The theater lights dimmed around us, but I could still hear the echo of his appreciation ringing in the air. Not jealousy, not possession, but something else entirely. The sound of a man who had gotten exactly what he wanted. Come, he said, taking my hand. We have things to discuss. The dressing room behind the stage was small, intimate, with mirrors reflecting our doubled image. Graham poured wine from a bottle that had been waiting, as if every detail of this evening was planned. How long? I asked, accepting the glass. My hand still trembled slightly. 6 months of planning. He sat across from me on the worn velvet chair, finding the right theater, the right men, arranging every detail. But why? Graham swirled his wine, considering. Do you remember our anniversary dinner? You ordered the salmon, as always. I had the steak, as always. We talked about the weather, the neighbors, anything but what we really wanted. I remembered. The careful conversation, the polite kiss goodnight, the way we'd both pretended satisfaction was enough. I watched you that night, he continued, and I realized we'd become strangers, performing a marriage instead of living one. So I decided to give you something real. You watched me with 11 men. I watched you become yourself again. His gray eyes held mine steadily. The woman I fell in love with in law school. The one who used to take risks, who wasn't afraid of her own desires. The invitation sat on the vanity table between us, that elegant script now carrying different weight. I understood the gift wasn't just the evening. It was permission to want more than we'd allowed ourselves. And now, Graham smiled, the same secretive expression from our kitchen. Now we plan the second act together, both of us directing this time. I felt something shift between us, a balance of power redistributing itself. What did you have in mind? That, he said, reaching for my hand, depends on what you discovered about yourself tonight. 3 weeks later, I sat in our study reviewing the plans Graham and I had drafted together. The next performance would be different, more intimate, with carefully chosen participants who understood the artistry we were creating. The evening at the theater had changed something fundamental between us. We spoke more directly now, named our desires instead of dancing around them. The careful politeness that had governed our marriage for years had burned away under those stage lights, leaving something more honest in its place. Graham entered with coffee in the morning paper. The venue confirmed, he said, settling beside me on the couch. Next Saturday. I studied the guest list we'd compiled. Friends who'd hinted at their own marital restlessness. Couples who might appreciate what we'd discovered about performance and truth. Not the suburban dinner party crowd, but people who understood that some hungers required feeding. Are you nervous? He asked. No. I surprised myself with the certainty. Excited. The woman who had stood on that stage 3 weeks ago lived in me now, no longer hidden behind professional smiles and appropriate responses. Graham had orchestrated my awakening, but I'd chosen to embrace it completely. We reviewed the evening's choreography together. who would arrive, when, how the scenes would unfold, the careful balance between spontaneity and structure. Equal partners now in designing our own desires. The clock chimed noon. In 6 hours, we would host our first gathering as co directors of something unprecedented. The careful life we'd built was gone, replaced by something riskier and infinitely more alive. Graham's hand found mine as we finalized the last details. 23 years of marriage, and we were finally learning how to want the same things. The curtain was rising on our second act, and this time we both held the script. The first guests arrived at 6:30, their nervous energy palpable as they crossed our threshold. Sarah and Mark, the couple from the coffee shop, clutched each other's hands like lifelines. Behind them came Dr. Elena Vasquez, the therapist who'd sparked this entire journey, her professional composure softened by genuine curiosity. "Welcome to our experiment," I said, surprising myself with how natural the words felt. Graham squeezed my shoulder, his presence steady and reassuring. Our living room had been transformed. We'd pushed back furniture to create an intimate circle of chairs, dimmed the overhead lights in favor of warm table lamps, and placed a simple sign-up sheet on the coffee table. Tonight's topic: what we wish we'd said sooner. As more couples filtered in, 12 in total, ages ranging from newlyweds to silver-haired partners celebrating 40 years together, I felt a flutter of panic. What if this failed spectacularly? What if we'd misread everything? Graham must have sensed my doubt. He moved to the center of the circle and began speaking, his voice carrying the same quiet authority he'd once used in boardrooms, now repurposed for something infinitely more important. 23 years ago, Margaret and I thought we had marriage figured out, he said. We believed in parallel success, in not rocking the boat, in maintaining a beautiful surface while ignoring what lay beneath. His eyes found mine. We were wrong about almost everything. A murmur of recognition rippled through the group. Sarah leaned forward, her grip on Mark's hand loosening slightly. 6 months ago, we nearly lost each other, I continued, picking up where Graham left off. Not to infidelity or addiction or any dramatic crisis. We almost lost each other to politeness, to the assumption that love meant never having difficult conversations. The room was completely silent now, the kind of attention that felt sacred. Dr. Vasquez nodded encouragingly. What changed? She asked, though I suspected she already knew. We started telling the truth, Graham and I said simultaneously, then laughed at our synchronicity. For the next 3 hours, our living room became a sanctuary for honesty. Couples shared stories of resentment that had calcified into routine, of dreams deferred in the name of practicality, of the small daily betrayals that accumulate like sediment in a marriage. But more than that, they shared breakthroughs. The newlyweds admitted their terror of becoming their parents. The 40-year veterans confessed they'd been sleeping in separate beds for a decade and were ready to try sharing space again. Sarah and Mark revealed they'd been pretending to want children to please each other, when what they really wanted was to travel the world together. As the evening wound down, couples exchanged contact information, making plans for coffee dates and hiking trips. The sign-up sheet for next month's gathering filled quickly. This felt like church, whispered an elderly woman named Rose as she hugged me goodbye. But the kind where you don't have to pretend to be perfect. After the last guest departed, Graham and I stood in our transformed living room, surrounded by empty wine glasses and the lingering warmth of shared vulnerability. So, he said, gathering me into his arms, how does it feel to be a revolutionary? I laughed, but beneath the humor lay something profound. We had indeed started a revolution, not against marriage, but for it. For the radical idea that love could grow stronger through honesty rather than weaker. It feels like the beginning, I said, looking around at our space that would never quite be the same. Like we finally figured out what we want to be when we grow up. Graham kissed my forehead, and I felt the future spreading before us like an uncharted map, full of possibility and purpose. Our second act was no longer just beginning. It was fully, beautifully underway.